Clara Hensley had grown used to the sound of laughter echoing through the glass walls of Holloway and Burke LLP, the kind of sharp, cruel laughter that wasn't shared with her but directed at her, ricocheting off polished marble floors and modern art canvases as if to remind her of her place in this tower of ambition where reputations were forged, fortunes were made, and people like her, secretaries, assistants, paper pushers, were meant to exist as background noise, silent cogs in a machine that fed on egos and thrived on arrogance, and yet while they laughed, while they smirked at her when she stumbled into a room with an armful of binders or mispronounced the Latin phrases they tossed around like weapons, Clara was learning, watching, cataloging every smug smirk, every careless mistake, every whispered deal sealed not with justice but with corruption, and she was building something inside herself, a fire forged not in the pursuit of prestige like theirs but in the deep, gnawing hunger for respect, for retribution, for the chance to prove that even the most invisible person in a room could become the most dangerous. For years, she had been overlooked, underestimated, treated as though her intelligence began and ended with her ability to type 60 words a minute or bring Richard Burke his coffee exactly the way he liked it, black, no sugar, one stir counterclockwise. But beneath her patient smile and soft-spoken demeanor was a woman whose life had once been destined for something far greater than managing calendars and making travel arrangements. Clara had been, once upon a time, the brightest star in her pre-law program, a girl with sharp instincts, an iron memory, and a passion for justice so fierce that professors whispered she was born for the courtroom, destined to be the kind of attorney who could dismantle an argument with a single glance at the evidence. But life has a cruel way of testing the strongest dreams, and hers was shattered the day her mother collapsed at work, lungs scarred by years of factory dust, her body too fragile to keep going, and Clara, only 22 then, had put her ambitions aside, taking the first steady job that came her way to pay hospital bills, to buy medicine, to keep a roof over their heads. That job happened to be at Holloway and Burke LLP. And though she had told herself it would only be temporary, weeks became months, months became years, and before she knew it, Clara had spent nearly a decade as the quiet secretary no one took seriously in a firm where men in $1,000 suits strutted like gods, laughing at her in the same breath they laughed at the lives they ruined in courtrooms across the country. She endured because she had no choice, because her mother's treatments depended on her paycheck, because the world doesn't pause to wait for broken dreams to mend. But endurance doesn't mean blindness, and while she typed their memos, while she filed their documents, while she poured their coffee, Clara was also reading, absorbing, analyzing, and slowly stitching together a mosaic of corruption so vast and intricate it would one day become the sword she wielded against them. It began, as so many revolutions do, with a small spark, a detail overlooked by men too arrogant to believe a secretary's eyes could catch what theirs did not. And that spark came the day Clara was assigned to organize discovery documents for a high-profile case involving Draycott Pharmaceuticals, one of the firm's most lucrative clients, a titan in the medical industry accused of hiding adverse effects in its flagship painkiller, a drug that had already killed dozens across the country. The partners, Richard Burke and Martin Holloway, treated the case as routine damage control, a bump in the road easily smoothed with legal gymnastics and PR spin, but Clara, as she combed through thousands of scanned documents and confidential emails, noticed patterns, language that repeated across internal reports, subtle edits in trial data summaries, phrases like mitigate perception and contain fallout, that should never have appeared in honest medical research. Her sharp mind, long dormant in the shadows, reawakened, and she began to dig deeper, her heart pounding as she uncovered internal memos between executives acknowledging fatalities while instructing their teams to bury the numbers, emails in which senior attorneys at Holloway and Burke advised the pharmaceutical giant on how to suppress whistleblowers, and the most damning of all, a confidential agreement signed by Richard Burke himself promising to manage exposure of certain test results in exchange for fees that dwarfed the salaries of everyone else in the firm combined. Clara's pulse raced as she pieced the puzzle together, realizing she was staring at evidence not only of corporate negligence but of outright conspiracy, a tangled web that could bring down not just Draycott Pharmaceuticals but the very partners who had laughed at her for years. She should have been afraid, she told herself, but instead she felt something else. A clarity, a rising sense of inevitability, as though the universe itself had been waiting for her to find this, to hold this weapon forged of paper and ink in her hands, and in that moment, Clara made a decision. She would no longer endure. She would no longer sit in silence while the wolves feasted. She would build her own case file, meticulous and irrefutable, and when the time was right, she would unleash it not just to protect the victims Draycott had silenced but to destroy the men who had made her invisible. Still, Clara knew patience was her greatest ally. Recklessness would get her fired before she had the chance to act, so she played her part flawlessly, smiling when they joked about her cute little shoes, nodding when Richard barked for coffee, answering phones with the perfect tone of professional cheer, all the while slipping copies of documents into a private folder she encrypted and backed up on multiple drives, a digital fortress no partner could ever breach. Days turned into weeks as she quietly amassed her arsenal, each file another dagger, each memo another nail in the coffin of Holloway and Burke, and with every addition, her confidence grew. She began to imagine the moment, to savor it in her mind, the day their laughter would die in their throats, the day the secretary they dismissed would stand in the center of their empire with the power to shatter it in her hands. That day came sooner than she expected.